Arizona, 1873. The settlers made their choice quickly. Sarah Mitchell would hang at dawn. They said she helped the Apache people, and nothing she said could change their minds. She sat in her jail cell as the sun set, turning the desert red. In the growing darkness, someone moved like a shadow near the town. It was Running Cloud, the Apache warrior everyone feared. His chief had told him to stay far from the town. But there was something about this woman's story that pulled at his heart, making him think of old stories his people told. That night, under the red moon, he would make a choice that would change everything for both his people and hers. What made this fierce warrior willing to risk it all, even his own life, to save a woman the settlers wanted dead? 2 months earlier, Sarah's fingers had traced the worn leather binding of her medicine journal, its pages heavy with pressed herbs and careful notes. Boston seemed a lifetime ago as she sat in her small cabin on the edge of town, recording the day's lessons. The Apache woman had shown her how to prepare the red bark in ways her medical training never mentioned, ways that worked better than anything she'd learned back east. "Miss Mitchell!" A sharp knock at the door made her jump. She quickly slid the journal beneath a loose floorboard, her heart racing. "Miss Mitchell, we need you at the Thompson place." Sarah grabbed her official medical bag, the one with properly labeled bottles and instruments that wouldn't raise questions. Mrs. Thompson was having her baby early. No time for fear or second thoughts. The night air hit her face as she opened the door, to find young Billy Thompson, his horse lathered with sweat. "Ma's bad off, miss. Pa sent me running. Give me a moment to saddle up." Sarah's mind was already sorting through possibilities, counting weeks, considering options. She thought of the preparation of blue cohosh the Apache medicine woman had taught her, how it could ease a difficult birth. But that knowledge would have to stay locked away, safe with her journal under the floorboards. The ride to the Thompson ranch was silent, except for the horse's hooves and Billy's occasional sniffle. Sarah had learned early that out here, tears were private things, even for 12-year-old boys worried about their mothers. Inside the ranch house, Martha Thompson lay pale and sweating, her face twisted in pain. Sarah's trained eye noted the signs: breech birth, dangerous bleeding, the kind of situation that in Boston would have meant calling for a doctor, probably losing both mother and child. But Sarah wasn't in Boston anymore. She set her official bag aside and took Martha's hand. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to trust me. I'm going to try something different, something that might save you both." Martha's eyes, glazed with pain, fixed on her face. A slight nod. Sarah turned to Billy's father, John Thompson, standing helpless by the bedroom door. "Mr. Thompson, I need you to boil water, and then I need you to wait outside. What happens in this room stays between us women." He hesitated only a moment before nodding. Out here, where the nearest doctor was 2 days' ride, pride took a back seat to survival. Once alone with Martha and the midwife, Mrs. Parsons, Sarah reached into a hidden pocket of her skirt. The small pouch of herbs she always carried, prepared the way she'd been taught in secret meetings at the edge of the desert. Her fingers found the familiar textures: rough bark, smooth seeds, dried leaves. "Mrs. Parsons, you've helped me before. I need your silence now." The older woman's eyes widened at the sight of the herbs, but she said nothing. She'd buried too many mothers and babies to let prejudice stand in the way of hope. Working quickly, Sarah prepared the medicine as she'd been shown. Ancient knowledge, mixed with her modern training, East meeting West, in a desperate race against time. Martha drank without question, trust winning over fear. An hour later, as dawn painted the desert gold, a baby's cry split the air. Martha Thompson held her healthy daughter while Sarah cleaned up, carefully disposing of any evidence of unorthodox methods. Mrs. Parsons helped in silence, but her approving nod said everything. Sarah rode home as the sun rose, exhausted but satisfied. In her cabin, she pulled out her journal and recorded everything: the complications, the treatment, the successful outcome. One more piece of evidence that there was wisdom in these lands older than any Boston medical text. She'd arrived in Arizona, territory full of Eastern certainty, armed with her nurse's training and proper medical bag. But the harsh realities of frontier life had quickly taught her humility. That first year, she'd lost too many patients sticking strictly to what she'd been taught. Then she'd met Walks with Stars, the Apache medicine woman who'd seen her gathering herbs and recognized a kindred spirit. At first, Sarah had resisted. Everything she'd been taught said these people were savages, their practices primitive superstition. But she couldn't argue with results. Now, her journal held two kinds of medicine side by side. Scientific notes in precise handwriting, sharing pages with carefully recorded wisdom, passed down through generations of Apache healers. Each entry was a small act of defiance against the prejudices that divided this land. Sarah knew the risks. If the town discovered her studying Apache medicine, learning from people they considered enemies, she'd lose everything. But every time she saved a life using these forbidden methods, she knew it was worth it. She closed the journal and returned it to its hiding place. Tomorrow, she would meet Walks with Stars again, hungry to learn more. For now, she needed sleep. She didn't know that in 2 months' time, this same journal would seal her fate, turning neighbors into accusers and forcing a warrior to choose between duty and conscience. Running Cloud held the eagle feather up to the dying light, studying how the last rays of sun turned its edges to fire. 20 years he'd worn it, earned in his first raid as a warrior. Now it felt heavy in his hands, weighted with duty and expectation. The council has spoken, Grey Wolf's voice carried across the evening air. The white woman dies with the rising. Son, we do not interfere. Running Cloud kept his face still, though his heart raced like a wild horse. He had seen the woman they spoke of, watched her from the shadows as she worked. She was not like the others. She learns our ways, Grey Wolf continued, reading his silence. This makes her more dangerous, not less. I have watched her with Walks with Stars. Running Cloud finally spoke, his voice low. She heals with respect, with honor. She writes our secrets in her book. Grey Wolf spat on the ground. To give to others who would use them against us. But Running Cloud had seen more than that. He had watched her turn away payment from poor families, share her own food with hungry children, both white and Apache. Had seen her kneel in the dirt beside the dying, easing their path to the spirit world, with gentle hands and ancient songs learned from Walks with Stars. The eagle feather caught the last light, and for a moment a memory flashed bright as lightning. His grandmother's voice, telling him the old story of the medicine bridge, when the spirits prophesied a joining of two healing paths that would bring peace to the land. Some secrets are meant to be shared, he said carefully. The spirits do not give wisdom to one people alone. Grey Wolf's face hardened. You sound like a woman, not a warrior. Remember your place, Running Cloud. Remember whose blood runs in your veins. The blood of chiefs and medicine men both, though few now living knew that truth. His grandmother had been a healer before the white soldiers came, before she fled to marry a warrior and hide her gifts. She had taught him in secret, passing on knowledge that men were not meant to carry. Perhaps that was why he couldn't ignore the pull of this woman's fate. Something in her reminded him of his grandmother. That same quiet strength, that same dedication to healing above all else. I remember, Running Cloud said, tucking the eagle feather back into his hair. I remember everything. Grey Wolf studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. See that you do. The council's word is final. Any who break it are dead to us. Running Cloud watched the old warrior walk away, his shoulders straight with certainty. But certainty was a luxury he could no longer afford. In his mind, he saw again the woman's face as they led her to the jail, saw the peace in her eyes even as they cursed her. No fear, only sadness. The sadness of a healer watching sickness spread. His fingers found the eagle feather again, tracing its familiar shape, 20 years ago, he had earned it by following orders, by being the warrior they wanted him to be. Perhaps now it was time to earn it again, differently. The moon was rising, red as blood. His grandmother had told him of another prophecy, one that spoke of a night when the moon would wear war paint, when old boundaries would break and new paths would open. A night when a warrior would have to choose between what was safe and what was right. Running Cloud checked his weapons, feeling the weight of each knife, the smooth grip of his bow. He had been the tribe's best scout for 15 years, moving, like a shadow, through both desert and town. They would expect him to guard the approaches tonight, watching for any rescue attempt. They would not expect him to be the rescuer. The eagle feather trembled slightly in the evening breeze. By tomorrow, he might lose everything, his place, his people, his honor. Or perhaps, whispered his grandmother's voice in his memory, he might finally find them all. Sheriff Wade Miller's keys clinked softly against his hip as he made his evening rounds. 3 brass, 1 iron, and a single silver key that opened the cell where Sarah Mitchell waited for dawn. He'd known her for 2 years, watched her heal their people, and now he had to guard her death. The red moon cast strange shadows through the jailhouse windows. Wade touched the keys again, a nervous habit. Something felt wrong tonight, like the air before a storm. "Brought you some water, Miss Mitchell." His voice was gruff with discomfort. Sarah sat on her narrow cot, back straight, hands folded in her lap, peaceful, like she was waiting for a social call instead of a hanging. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't make sense," he muttered, more to himself than her. "You done good work here. The truth isn't always what we want it to be." She accepted, the tin cup, her chains rattling softly. "But it's still the truth." Wade shifted uncomfortably. The journal they'd found, full of Indian medicine and secrets, had sealed her fate. But he remembered when she'd saved his daughter from fever last winter, using medicines he didn't understand but couldn't deny had worked. A shadow moved outside. The window. Wade's hand dropped to his gun, but he saw nothing in the moonlight. Just nerves, he told himself. Everyone was jumpy tonight. "Get some rest, Miss Mitchell." He turned to leave, keys jingling. "Sheriff?" Her voice stopped him. "Thank you for being kind." He nodded stiffly and walked out, trying not to think about tomorrow. In the office, he hung the keyring on its hook, bright silver catching the lamplight. His deputy, young Tommy, Burke, dozed in the corner chair. "Wake up, boy," Wade growled. "Keep your eyes sharp tonight." Tommy jerked awake, hand fumbling for his gun. "Yes, sir. Just resting my eyes a minute." Wade sighed and settled behind his desk. It was going to be a long night. Neither man saw the shadow that slipped through the moonlight, watching through the window. Running Cloud had studied the jailhouse for weeks, learning its rhythms, its weaknesses. The keys hung just below the window, temptingly close. He'd already spotted 3 problems. The deputy's chair faced the window, the floorboards by the back door creaked, and Sarah's chains would make enough noise to wake the dead. But he'd also seen something useful. Every night at midnight, Tommy Burke took exactly 7 minutes to visit the outhouse behind the jail. The sheriff always checked the cells one last time at 11. Between those times, the office was empty. Running Cloud touched the eagle feather in his hair, offering a silent prayer. Then he began to move. The shadow that slid through the office window made less noise than a falling leaf. Tommy's snores covered even that. Calloused fingers closed around the keyring, lifting it with infinite care from its hook. Each key was silenced between practiced hands. Sarah heard nothing, but she felt the change in the air. A presence, deadly but gentle, like a mountain cat padding through deep snow. She kept her breathing steady, gave no sign she'd noticed. The silver key turned in the lock with a click that seemed thunderous in the quiet jail. But Tommy's snores never faltered, and no other sound came from the sheriff's office. Running Cloud stepped into the cell, a darkness within darkness. His fingers found Sarah's chains, working with swift precision. He'd learned this skill breaking horses from white ranches before the peace treaty. Strange how old sins could become new virtues. Sarah felt the chains loosen and fought to keep. Her movements slow and quiet. One wrong move, one clank of metal, and it would all be over. "Trust me," breathed a voice like wind through canyon walls. "Move as I move." She nodded, though she doubted he could see it. Strong hands guided her up, teaching her body the silent language of escape. Each step placed with care, each movement measured and smooth. They reached the cell door. Sarah could see Tommy slumped in his chair, mouth open, hat tipped over his eyes. The keys hung back on their hook, silver gleaming innocently. No one would know how they'd been used until it was too late. Running Cloud's hand at her elbow guided her to the window. The drop looked impossible in the red moonlight, but those same strong hands lifted her as if she weighed nothing, setting her gently on the packed earth outside. She stood in the night air, free, her heart thundering so loud she was sure it would wake the whole town. Running Cloud landed beside her without a sound, his face finally visible in the moonlight. High cheekbones, eyes deep as desert wells, and an eagle feather that caught the red light like a flame. "Why?" she whispered. "Run." "Now," he answered. "Talk later." Shouts erupted from the saloon 2 streets over, an ordinary brawl. But it would bring the sheriff running. Without another word, Sarah followed her rescuer into the darkness, leaving behind the life she'd known, guided by a warrior who'd just sacrificed everything to save her, the silver key that had opened her. Cell gleamed briefly in the moonlight back on its hook, holding its secrets until dawn. Running Cloud pulled the worn deerskin map from his medicine pouch as the first light of dawn crept over the desert. They'd been moving all night, following trails no white man would see, but now they needed to make a choice. Sarah watched as his fingers traced the faded markings, symbols she'd never seen before, telling stories of hidden paths and secret places. "Your people will be looking for us," she said quietly, wrapping her arms around herself in the pre-dawn chill. "And mine." "Yes." He studied the map another moment before returning it to his pouch. "But they will look in the wrong places." They'd left. No trail a tracker could follow. Sarah had watched in amazement as Running Cloud led them through rocky passages that seemed impossible to navigate, using the red moon's light like a compass. When they crossed open ground, he showed her how to walk without disturbing the sand, placing each foot with the precision of a desert cat. "The map shows old ways," he explained, offering her his water skin. "Ways known only to medicine people. My grandmother's grandmother marked these trails." Sarah took a careful sip. Her medical training told her to conserve water in the desert, but her body craved more. "You're a medicine man?" A shadow crossed his face. "I was not meant to be. But my grandmother had secrets of her own." The sun was rising now, turning the desert into a sea of gold and shadow. Sarah saw for the first time the tattoo on Running Cloud's right wrist, a small spiral that looked remarkably like the healing symbols she'd learned from walks with stars. "We need to move," he said, rising smoothly to his feet. "The heat will come soon." Sarah stood more slowly, her muscles protesting the night's hard travel. "Where are we going?" "There is a place." Running Cloud pointed to distant mountains, their peaks still wrapped in morning mist. "A sacred cave where 2 rivers meet beneath the earth. My people will not follow us there. They believe it is protected by spirits." "And is it?" His eyes met hers, serious but with a glimmer of something else. "We will find out." They moved through the awakening desert, Running Cloud setting a pace that challenged Sarah but never quite broke her. When she stumbled, his hand was there, strong and steady. When she needed rest, he found shade and watched the horizon with the patience of a hawk. Near midday, they paused in the shadow of a towering red rock formation. Running Cloud produced a small bundle of dried meat and pine nuts, sharing their first real meal since the escape. Sarah watched as he pulled out the map again, its surface catching the harsh sunlight. "May I?" she asked hesitantly. He studied her for a moment, then handed over the precious document. Sarah handled it with the same care she'd give a rare medical text. The deerskin was soft with age, its surface covered in intricate markings. Some she recognized from her studies with walks with stars, symbols for water, healing plants, safe shelter. Others were mysteries, their meanings lost to all but a few. My grandmother said this map shows more than paths, Running Cloud said quietly. It shows the way between worlds, between peoples. Sarah traced a spiral pattern that looked like flowing, water. Like the medicine I learned from walks with stars, a bridge between different ways of healing. Yes. Running Cloud took back the map, his fingers brushing hers. Perhaps that is why the spirits guided me to help you. A distant cry made them both freeze, eagle or human signal. Running Cloud listened intently, then began packing away their small meal. We must move. There are caves ahead where we can rest through the worst heat. Sarah rose quickly, dusting off her skirts. Already she was learning to read his tones, to move when urgency colored his voice. Their survival depended on this growing trust, this dance of two people from different worlds, learning to step together. As they merged back into the desert's shifting patterns of light and shadow, Sarah thought of her medicine journal, left hidden beneath her cabin's floorboards. Another kind of map, she realized, one that, like Running Clouds, tried to bridge the space between worlds. Behind them, the morning sun cast their shadows far across the sand, two separate shapes that seemed to merge into one as they moved deeper into the wilderness, guided by ancient paths marked on worn deerskin, heading toward a place where rivers met in darkness and spirits guarded the secrets of the earth. Sheriff Wade Miller knelt in the desert sand, squinting at signs most men would miss. Beside him, Tommy Burke shifted nervously, his horse stamping in the early morning heat. "Well?" Tommy asked. "Which way'd they go?" Wade picked up a small stone, one of several arranged in a pattern only visible to those who knew to look. Running. Cloud's signature, a warning to his own people, clear as a signed letter to those who could read it. But the sheriff had spent 20 years learning the desert's languages. South, he lied, placing the stone back exactly as he'd found it. The markers pointed east, toward the mountains. They're heading for Mexico. On a ridge 3 miles away, Grey Wolf found the same message written in stone. His weathered face hardened as he read Running Cloud's true meaning. East, to the sacred caves, a challenge and a choice wrapped in one. 2 search parties moving in opposite directions. One following a false trail, the other closing in on true one. Wade Miller had made his choice. He'd give them a day's head start, though he'd never admit why. Maybe it was remembrance of his daughter's fever-broken body, made whole by Sarah's healing. Maybe it was the quiet dignity with which she'd faced her sentence. Grey Wolf made a different choice. Running Cloud had broken tribal law, had stolen the woman they'd agreed to let the settlers handle. Worse, he was taking her to sacred ground. That could not be allowed. Between these hunting parties, Sarah and Running Cloud shared a meager breakfast of pine nuts in the shade of a narrow canyon. She watched as he arranged small stones in a complex pattern, his hands moving with practiced precision. "Teaching stones," he explained, sensing her curiosity. "They tell stories, mark trails, warn of danger. My people have used them since the first rains fell." Sarah studied the pattern. "Like a written language?" "Similar." He adjusted one stone. "Slightly, but alive. The desert moves them, changes them. We must learn to read not just the stones, but the spaces between them." A hawk's cry echoed off the canyon walls. Running Cloud's head snapped up, eyes scanning the ridgeline. "Not a hawk. Your people?" Sarah asked softly. "Yes." He began gathering their few supplies. "Grey Wolf leads them. He will read my signs, know where we go. Then why leave them?" Running Cloud's hands stilled on the stones. "Some messages are meant to be read. Some choices must be faced." He looked at her then, his eyes deep with meaning she couldn't quite grasp. Grey Wolf must decide what matters more, the lore of the tribe or the lore of the spirits. They moved deeper into the canyon, where shadow and stone played tricks with distance. Running Cloud showed her how to walk, without disturbing the delicate patterns of sand and stone that would betray their passage. When they had to cross open ground, he taught her to read the sky, to time their movements between the watching eyes. Of circling birds, there is a story, he said, as they rested briefly in a hollow between towering red cliffs, of a time when all peoples spoke one language, read the same signs, before pride and fear drew lines between us. Sarah thought of her medical journal, where European drugs shared pages with Apache healing ways. Perhaps some lines can be crossed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps that is what the spirits intend. The sound of distant hoofbeats froze them both. Running Cloud pulled Sarah deeper into the shadows, his body shielding hers as a group of riders passed above them on the canyon rim. The sheriff's posse, following the false trail south. When the sound faded, Sarah realized she was gripping Running Cloud's arm, her fingers pressed against the spiral tattoo on his wrist. He made no move to pull away. "Your sheriff," he said quietly, "chose to read a different message in my stones." Sarah released his arm slowly, understanding dawning. "You left 2 trails. The stones speak truth to those ready to hear it." He helped her to her feet. "Come. We must reach the caves before Grey Wolf decides which truth he serves." They moved on through the deepening day, 2 souls caught between worlds, between truths, guided by ancient stones that spoke to those who knew how to listen. The canyon, walls narrowed until Sarah could touch both sides with outstretched hands. Running Cloud moved ahead, his steps careful in the dim light. Then he stopped so suddenly she nearly ran into him. "Here," he said softly. "Look." Sunlight filtered through. A crack in the rock above them, illuminating the canyon wall like a spotlight on a stage. Sarah's breath caught. Before them spread an enormous petroglyph, its red and white pigments still vivid against the sandstone. Ancient figures danced across the rock face, some human, some animal, some somewhere in between. The story wall. Running Cloud said, his voice heavy with reverence, "My grandmother spoke of this place, but I never thought to see it myself." Sarah stepped closer, drawn by a series of interconnected spirals that reminded her of the tattoo on Running Cloud's wrist. "What does it say?" "It tells many stories. But here," his fingers traced a complex pattern where 2 spirals merged into one. "This speaks of a time when 2 healing paths would join, when someone from the world of paper medicine would learn the old ways, and someone from the old ways would learn to walk in the new world." Sarah's heart quickened. "Like my journal and your grandmother's teachings." "Yes." Running Cloud's hand moved to another section of the wall where human figures stood beneath what looked like a red moon. "And here it speaks of a night when the moon wears war paint, when old boundaries break." "The night you rescued me," he nodded. "The prophecy says that when these signs appear, a choice must be made. A choice that could bridge the gap between peoples or widen it forever." Sarah studied the ancient images, seeing them through new eyes. Here was a figure holding what could be herbs. There another with what looked like a book. Between them, lines of power or knowledge flowed like water. "Your people would say this is why I had to die," she said quietly. "Because I crossed a boundary, learned things I wasn't supposed to know. And my people would say I betrayed them by helping you escape." Running Cloud's voice was equally soft. "But the spirits speak of bridges, not walls, of paths joining, not ending." A shaft of sunlight struck the center of the petroglyph, and Sarah gasped. Hidden pigments, invisible in normal light, began to glow. A new pattern emerged. 2 figures, hand in hand, standing beneath a symbol that combined the spiral of Apache medicine with what looked remarkably like the medical caduceus. "The prophecy is not finished," Running Cloud said, watching the light paint its revelation across the stone. "It speaks of 2 who will walk between worlds, who will face both death and rejection to open a new path." "Like us?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Running Cloud turned to her then, his eyes reflecting the strange light from the wall. "Perhaps, if we are brave enough." strong enough. A distant rumble of thunder made them both look up at the narrow strip of sky above. Storm clouds were gathering, unusual for this time of year. "We should go," Running Cloud said. "The sacred caves are still half a day's journey, and Grey Wolf will not stop for rain." But Sarah couldn't look away from the ancient artwork, from the promise painted there centuries ago. "Will you teach me to read the signs, to understand the stories? If you will teach me what you know of paper medicine. True bridges must be built from both sides." Their eyes met in the painted light, and something shifted between them, a recognition, a possibility. Then the sun slipped behind the clouds, and the hidden images faded back into the stone. As they moved deeper into the canyon, Sarah found herself thinking of all the boundaries she'd crossed to reach this moment. The proper Boston girl who'd scandalized her family by training as a nurse. The Western settler who'd dared to learn from those her neighbors called savages. And now this, following an Apache warrior toward an uncertain future, guided by prophecies, painted in the dawn of time. Behind them, the story wall kept its ancient vigil, waiting for the next shaft of light to reveal its hidden truths. And somewhere in the gathering storm, two groups of pursuers followed their separate trails, each believing they served justice, while destiny wove its own pattern across the desert sky. The storm broke over them with sudden fury. Lightning split. The darkened sky and thunder echoed off canyon walls like angry spirits. Running Cloud grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward a massive juniper tree that clung to the rocky slope. "Not there," she shouted over the wind. "Lightning seeks tall things." But he was already leading her past the tree to a hollow in the rock face behind it. Just in time, a bolt of blue-white fire struck the juniper with explosive force, filling the air with the sharp scent of ozone and burning wood. They huddled in the shallow cave, watching as rain turned the desert into flowing silver. The burning tree hissed and smoked despite the downpour, its trunk split open to reveal a glowing heart of ember and ash. "Your paper medicine was right," Running Cloud said, a note of approval in his voice. "But how did you know?" Sarah rapped, her arms around herself, shivering in her wet clothes. "Benjamin Franklin proved it with a kite and key. Lightning follows the highest path to ground." "Ah," he nodded slowly. "Like the story of Eagle's fire. When Eagle stole lightning from the storm spirits, he was burned because he flew too high." They watched as another bolt illuminated the landscape, turning desert to day for a heartbeat. Sarah found herself studying Running Cloud's profile in that frozen moment. The strong line of his jaw, the quiet dignity in his bearing, the way his eyes seemed to hold mysteries as deep as the canyon itself. "You're cold," he said, shrugging off his leather vest. Before she could protest, he draped it over her shoulders. The leather was warm from his body, carrying a scent of sage and wilderness. "Thank you." She pulled it closer, suddenly aware of how close they sat, how the small space forced them to share warmth. "For everything. For saving my life. Perhaps you saved mine." His voice was thoughtful. "I was becoming lost in the warrior's path, forgetting the healing ways my grandmother taught me, until I saw you with Walks with Stars, learning our medicine. With such respect." A massive thunderclap shook loose rocks from above. Running Cloud instinctively pulled Sarah closer, shielding her with his body as pebbles clattered around them. When the rumbling faded, neither moved away. "The lightning tree," he said softly. "My people say when lightning strikes a tree but doesn't kill it, that tree becomes sacred, a bridge between earth and sky, marked by fire but made stronger." Sarah watched the glowing embers pulse in the split trunk like a beating heart. Like the prophecy on the story wall about bridges between worlds? Yes. His hand found hers in the darkness. Some bridges are made of stone, some of spirit. Some, he hesitated, then turned to face her. Some are made of heart. In the storm's wild light, Sarah saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. Desire, fear, hope, uncertainty. All the barriers between them seemed to fall away like rain. When he leaned in, she met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle as dawn, a testing of boundaries. Their second tasted of thunder and truth. By the third, Sarah had stopped counting, lost in the discovery of this new territory between them. Running Cloud's hands cradled her face with infinite care, as if she were made of precious clay. Her fingers traced the spiral tattoo on his wrist, feeling his pulse race beneath the skin. Outside, the storm raged on, but in their rocky shelter they had found a different kind of weather. "This changes everything," she whispered when they finally parted. Everything was already changing. He brushed a wet strand of hair from her cheek. "We are just brave enough to see it." The lightning tree crackled, drawing their attention. The fading stormlight, they could see how the strike had changed it. The split trunk had opened like a doorway, but the core remained strong, new patterns carved in wood by fire from the sky. "Like us," Sarah said, understanding suddenly. "Marked by fire, split open but not destroyed, changed into something new." Running Cloud's arms tightened around her. "The tree will heal. It will grow around its scars, become stronger where it was broken. The lightning's mark will always show the path it took from sky to earth." They stayed there as the storm passed, watching the lightning tree glow and fade, holding each other in the space between worlds. Both knew that come morning they would have to face the consequences of this new bridge they'd built. Grey Wolf and his warriors would still be coming. The sheriff's posse might realize they'd followed a false trail, but for now, in the storm's aftermath, they had found their own kind of shelter, not just from rain and lightning, but from the winds of prejudice and the thunder of old hatreds. Together, they watched the desert wash clean in the rain and dreamed of a future where bridges outweighed walls. Young Hawk moved through the storm's aftermath like a shadow, reading the desert's wet pages. 20 summers of training under Grey. Wolf had made him the tribe's best tracker after Running Cloud. Now he used those skills to hunt his former mentor. The lightning tree drew his eye immediately. No experienced Apache would shelter there in a storm unless they were guiding someone who didn't know better, someone like the White Woman. He found more signs in the hollow, 2 sets of footprints in damp sand, a scrap of cloth caught on rock, still damp. But it was the broken arrow shaft, snapped and discarded, that made his heart heavy. He recognized the distinctive fletching, Running Cloud's mark. Young Hawk held the broken pieces, remembering the day Running Cloud had taught him to fletch arrows. "The balance must be perfect," he had said, "like the balance between warrior and healer, between strength and wisdom." Now that balance was broken, and young Hawk had to choose which pieces to pick up. A mile away, Running Cloud stopped suddenly on a narrow trail, his body tensing. Sarah watched as he knelt to study the ground, his fingers tracing marks she couldn't see. "Someone followed us through the storm," he said quietly. "Young Hawk." "Is that bad?" Running Cloud stood slowly. "He was like a son to me. I taught him the ways of tracking, of reading the land's stories." He touched the eagle feather in his hair. "But he is sworn to Grey Wolf now. Will he betray us? That is the question that weighs on his heart." Running Cloud looked back the way they'd come. "I left him signs only he would understand. Now he must decide what to do with them." They pressed on, but Sarah sensed a new tension in Running Cloud's movements. This wasn't just any pursuer. This was family of the heart, and betrayal from such quarters cut deeper than any knife. Young Hawk followed their trail, his thoughts turbulent as the storm-washed sky. He found Running Cloud's messages in the subtle. Arrangement of stones in broken twigs pointed just so. They spoke of the prophecy, of bridges between worlds, of choices that could heal or wound. The final message stopped him cold. At the base of a red rock spire, Running Cloud had left his prized hunting knife, the one young Hawk had given him 5 summers ago. Beside it lay a small medicine pouch and a piece of paper covered in careful drawings of healing plants. The message was clear. Both worlds, both paths, both truths. Choose wisely. Young Hawk sank to his knees in the wet sand. Grey Wolf's words echoed in his head. The old ways must be protected. Mixed blood brings mixed loyalties. But Running Cloud's teachings whispered too. The greatest wisdom comes from seeing with more than one set of eyes. He touched the broken arrow pieces in his belt. An arrow could only fly true if all its parts worked together. Shaft, fletching, point, like the different medicines in that paper journal, like the different bloods in his own veins. Young Hawk was half Apache, half Mexican, taken in by the tribe as a child. Running Cloud had been the first to treat him as wholly Apache, teaching him to be proud of all his parts. Now he understood why. Making his decision, young Hawk stood and fired 3 shots from his rifle into the air, the signal to Grey Wolf that he'd found the trail. But when the war chief arrived, young Hawk would tell him of tracks leading south, toward Mexico. The broken arrow would stay hidden in his belt, a reminder that some things were meant to break so that stronger things could grow. Sarah and Running Cloud heard the rifle shots echo off the canyon walls. His face showed no emotion, but his hand found hers and squeezed gently. "Young Hawk has chosen," he said softly. "Which way?" A faint smile touched Running Cloud's lips. "He was always my best student. He learned that sometimes the truest path is the one that circles around like a hawk riding the wind." They moved on toward the sacred caves, their steps lighter now. Behind them, a young man with blood from 2 worlds stood guard over a broken arrow, protecting a new kind of truth. And somewhere ahead, the ancient spirits watched and waited, seeing their prophecy unfold, one choice at a time. The Valley of Shadows lived up to its name. Towering cliffs blocked the sun, creating a perpetual twilight where strange shapes seemed to move just at the edge of vision. Running Cloud touched the medicine pouch at his belt with each step, his grandmother's. Teachings heavy in his mind. "This place is sacred," he told Sarah, his voice barely above a whisper. "The spirits walk freely here." "What kind of spirits?" "All kinds." He helped her over a fallen boulder, his touch lingering longer than necessary. "The ancient ones say, this valley holds doors between worlds. Some who enter never return, others come back changed." Sarah studied the twisted rock formations that loomed around them. In the dim light, they did look like doors, or waiting figures. "Your people avoid this place." "Most do." Running Cloud drew the medicine pouch from his belt, its leather worn, smooth by generations of hands. "But medicine people come here for visions, for guidance." He opened the pouch carefully, revealing a collection of small sacred objects. Stones, feathers, bones, herbs. "My grandmother gave me this before she died. Said I'd know when to use it." A wind that shouldn't exist in the sheltered valley stirred Sarah's hair. She shivered, not from cold. "Is now the time?" "Listen." In the silence, Sarah heard it, a rhythmic sound, like distant drumming. But it seemed to come from the rocks themselves, a hollow beating that made her chest vibrate in response. "The heart of the earth," Running Cloud said. "The spirits are restless today. They know we're here." He selected a pinch of herbs from the pouch, casting them to the wind with words in Apache that made the air feel thick with power. The drumming changed pitch. New rhythms wove through it, creating a complex pattern that made Sarah think of pulse points and blood flow, of life's own music. "They speak to you," Running Cloud said, watching her face. "You hear it as a healer would." "Is that unusual for a white person?" "Yes." He touched her cheek gently. "But you have walked between worlds since before you met me. Perhaps that's why the spirits led us here." A shadow moved ahead, definitely not a trick of light this time. Running Cloud pushed Sarah behind him, drawing his knife. But instead of danger, they found a small cave entrance, its walls decorated with handprints in red ochre. "The Cave of Memories," he breathed. "Grandmother spoke of this place. The handprints are from healers across time, marking their passage between worlds." Sarah stepped closer, drawn by an inexplicable pull. Some of the handprints were so fresh they might have been made yesterday. Others were faded with age, barely visible beneath centuries of mineral deposits. Running Cloud pressed something into her palm, a small leather bag from his medicine pouch. Your own medicine bundle. Grandmother said to give it to the one who could hear the earth's heart. Sarah opened it with trembling fingers. Inside she found a perfect spiral shell, a white feather, and a small black stone that seemed to pulse with its own heat. These were meant for me. She saw you in her visions, a bridge builder, she called you, one who would help heal the rift between peoples. He took her hand, pressing it against one of the ancient handprints. Her fingers matched it perfectly. The spirits don't make mistakes. The drumming grew louder, and the black stone in Sarah's hand grew warmer. She felt dizzy with the power of this place, with the weight of prophecy and destiny. Running Cloud's arms steadied her as the valley's shadows seemed to dance around them. Rest here, he said softly. The spirits will guard our sleep. Tomorrow we face the hardest part of our journey. As they settled into the cave's shelter, Sarah clutched her new medicine bundle close. The rhythmic drumming had gentled to a lullaby, and the shadows now seemed protective rather than threatening. Running Cloud's quiet breathing beside her matched the earth's pulse perfectly. She thought of all the healers who had sheltered here before them, all the hands that had marked these walls, all the journeys between worlds that had led to this moment. Perhaps some boundaries were meant to be crossed. Perhaps some doors were meant to be opened. In her dreams that night, she danced with shadows that wore familiar faces, and the earth's heart beat in time with her own. The river roared before them, swollen with stormwater, carrying whole trees in its muddy rush. Running Cloud held a smooth black stone in his palm, reading its water-carved surface like a map. The crossing place has changed, he said, his voice tight with concern. The storm shifted the river's path. Sarah studied the churning water, her nurse's training calculating risks and possibilities. How deep? Too deep. He pointed to a spot where the current seemed to slow slightly. But there, see how the water moves. An underwater ledge creates a path. Dangerous, but possible. If we slip, the falls are a quarter-mile downstream. Running Cloud tucked the river stone into his medicine pouch. No one survives them. A distant gunshot echoed off the canyon walls. Grey Wolf's hunters closing in. They had no choice now. Running Cloud stripped down to his buckskins, helping Sarah remove her heavy outer dress. The less weight to drag them down, the better. He showed her how to tie her remaining clothes tight, how to angle her body against the current. Stay close, he said, checking the medicine pouch and other essential items they'd wrapped in oilcloth. The ledge is narrow. One wrong step. Sarah gripped his hand. Together then, the water hit them like an icy fist. Sarah gasped but kept moving, following Running Cloud's lead. The underwater ledge was rough stone beneath their feet, offering precious traction. But one slip would throw them into the main current, and then, halfway across, Running Cloud stopped. Suddenly, Sarah pressed against him, feeling his tension. The ledge drops here, he said over the river's roar. We'll have to swim. Sarah peered through the spray. The far bank looked impossibly distant. How far? 20 feet. The current runs strong, but there's a backwater eddy near that fallen tree. If we can reach it... More gunshots. Closer now. Sarah squared her shoulders. I was on the Boston swimming team. Follow my lead. Running Cloud's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. This was her element now. Wait for the current to slow, she said, watching the water's rhythm. There, now. They pushed off together. The river grabbed them instantly, but Sarah had learned to swim in rough Atlantic waters. She angled their bodies like a compass needle, using the current's force instead of fighting it. Running Cloud matched her movements perfectly, their strengths joining like streams flowing together. The fallen tree approached fast, too fast. Sarah's muscles burned as she fought to angle them toward the eddy. Running Cloud kicked strongly, adding his power to hers. For a moment, it seemed they would miss. Then the eddy caught them, spinning them into its relative calm. They grabbed the tree's branches, pulling themselves toward the bank. Behind them, rifle fire scattered across the water. Up, Running Cloud gasped. Quickly! They scrambled onto the shore and into the cover of thick willows. Through the branches, they saw Grey Wolf's warriors on the opposite bank, their horses rearing at the water's edge. No one would risk the crossing now, with the river running so fierce, safe for the moment. Sarah slumped against a boulder, exhausted. Running Cloud knelt beside her, pulling the river stone from his medicine pouch. In the sunlight, Sarah saw it was marked with natural swirls that did indeed look like a map of the river. "My people say these stones are the river's memories," he said, turning it in his hands. "They show where the water has been, where it might go. But today you read the river better than any stone." Sarah touched the smooth surface wonderingly. "Different kinds of knowledge, like your medicine and mine." "Yes," he smiled, rare and warm. "The stone shows the way, but it takes all our skills to walk it." They rested there briefly, letting sun and wind dry their clothes. The river had changed. Them, Sarah realized. They moved together now with unconscious grace, anticipating each other's needs, sharing strength. Like the water-carved stone, they had been shaped by what they'd passed through. Running Cloud tucked the stone away and helped her up. "The sacred caves are close now. By nightfall—" He didn't finish. They both knew reaching the caves wouldn't end their journey. Grey Wolf would find another crossing. The sheriff's posse might realize they'd been misled, and the prophecy still waited to be fulfilled. But they had crossed one mighty barrier together, each lending their wisdom when needed. Perhaps that was prophecy enough for now. The mountain cave opened like a giant mouth in the cliff face, its entrance partially hidden by a curtain of water from a small falls. Running Cloud led Sarah through the spray into a vast chamber where light filtered through cracks in the rock above, creating shifting patterns on the walls. "The sacred cave of two rivers," he said, his voice echoing slightly, "where waters meet beneath the earth." Sarah stood transfixed. Every surface was covered. In paintings, sweeping herds of buffalo, dancing spirit figures, suns and moons and stars. But it was the central image that drew her eye. Two figures standing palm to palm, one painted in red ochre, one in white clay, their forms merging in the middle to create a new color, a new shape. "The legend of first love," Running Cloud said, softly. "When Morning Star fell in love with Evening Sun, he built a small fire near the cave's center, and the flickering light made the painted figures seem to dance. As they dried their clothes and shared the last of their dried meat, Running Cloud told the story. In the beginning, the spirit people lived in two separate worlds, the people of day and the people of night. They never met, never knew of each other's existence. But Morning Star was curious. She stayed in the sky longer and longer each dawn, watching the night people return to their shadows. Sarah leaned against him, drawn into the tale. Above them, the painted Morning Star seemed to glow with her own light. One day, she saw Evening Sun, the last of the day people to leave the sky. Their eyes met across the dawn, and both forgot to fade away. Their love threw the world into chaos. Dawn and dusk merged, day and night blurred. The other spirits demanded they choose, be all of day or all of night. "What did they do?" Sarah asked, though she thought she knew. Running Cloud's arm tightened. Around her, they chose each other, stepped into the space between day and night, creating twilight. Their love made a new world possible, where day and night could meet softly, where shadow and light could dance. Sarah studied the painted figures, seeing how the artists had captured that moment of transformation. Like us. Like us. He turned her face to his gently. "Some say the prophecy isn't just about healing or medicine. It's about love strong enough to make new worlds." Their kiss was tender, unhurried. They had carved out this moment of peace, this cave of safety, and they would savor it. Later, as Running Cloud slept, Sarah explored the cave paintings by firelight. She found other stories there, tales of healing, of transformation, of bridges built between worlds. Near the back of the cave, a small natural shelf held offerings left by previous seekers, shells, feathers, bundles of herbs, smooth stones worn by water. She added her own offering, a small piece of paper from her medical notebook, carefully folded, containing drawings of plants that could heal and notes in 2 languages, a bridge of her own making. The sound of water was constant here, not the angry roar of the river they'd crossed, but a gentle music made by the meeting of 2 underground streams. One came from deep in the mountain, carrying minerals that made it run red. The other flowed from a spring near the surface, clear as sky. Where they met in a pool at the cave's heart, they created a new color, a new song. Running Cloud stirred and came to join her by the pool. The waters remember, he said, like the river stone. They remember every story of joining, of boundaries crossed, of new things born from the meeting of different worlds. Sarah dipped her hand in the mixed water, watching ripples spread. Will they remember us? They already do. He pointed to a fresh painting near the cave's entrance, one she hadn't noticed before. The ochre was barely dry. I added our story. While you slept, there they were, a woman with a medicine bag, a warrior with a healer's spiral on his wrist, standing together beneath a red moon. Around them, 2 kinds of medicine symbols merged and flowed like the cave's rivers. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's truth. He gathered her close. Whatever happens tomorrow, the cave will remember. The waters will remember. Love that makes new worlds doesn't die. They slept curled together beside the dying fire, while ancient spirits watched from painted walls and 2 rivers sang beneath the earth. For this one night, they had found their twilight space, their moment between worlds. But dawn would come, and with it, choices that would test every bridge they'd built. Dawn came too soon, seeping through the cracks in the cave ceiling like spilled gold. Running Cloud stood at the cave's mouth, reading the desert below while Sarah gathered there. Few possessions, neither spoke. The weight of coming choices lay heavy between them. Finally, Running Cloud reached into his medicine pouch and withdrew a stone unlike any Sarah had seen. Flat and oval, its surface was divided by a natural line of quartz that split it into 2 distinct halves, one dark, one light. The 2-path stone, he said, holding it out to her. Medicine people use it when the way forward isn't clear. Sarah took it carefully. The stone felt warm, as if it held some inner fire. How does it work? You hold it? Think of your choices, and let it show you their nature. He traced the quartz line with one finger. See how the division isn't straight? The paths wind together, touch, separate again, like life itself. Sarah studied the stone's pattern. On one side, the dark mineral seemed to flow into the light, creating swirls of grey. On the other, the separation was sharper, more complete. We have 3 choices, Running Cloud said quietly. We can run south to Mexico, live as outcasts, but together. We can separate, you to the east, me back to my people, each denying what we've found, or we can stand our ground, face both our peoples, try to make them see what we've seen. He took her hand, the stone held between their palms. But that path holds the most danger. Sarah thought of her medical journal, of all she'd learned from walks with stars, of Running Cloud's grandmother's prophecy and the cave paintings that seemed to tell their story before they lived it. If we run, she said slowly, nothing changes. The divisions remain. The hatred grows deeper. Running Cloud nodded. If we separate, we deny truth, deny what the spirits have shown us. But if we stand... Sarah turned the stone over, watching light play across its surface. They could kill us both. Yes. His voice was gentle. But whether we live or die, the truth would be spoken. The bridge would be built, even if we're not the ones to cross it. A shaft of sunlight struck the stone, and for a moment it seemed to glow from within. Sarah remembered the lightning tree, split but not destroyed, made stronger by its scars. remembered the river they'd crossed together, each lending strength when needed. The ancient ones say the hardest path is usually the right one, Running Cloud said, but this choice must be made together. What we risk as one. Sarah looked up at him, seeing the warrior and healer both in his face, the man who'd risked everything to save her, who'd shown her how different kinds of truth could flow together like the cave's twin rivers. We stand, she said firmly. We show them what's possible. Running Cloud's smile was brief but bright as dawn. I knew you would choose courage, not courage. She pressed the two-path stone back into his hand. Truth. They spent the next hour planning. They would wait for Grey Wolf's warriors to find them. Running Cloud was certain they would within a day. But they would meet them here, in this sacred space, where the cave paintings told stories of boundaries crossed and new worlds born. We'll need help, Running Cloud said, checking his weapons out of habit, though they'd agreed not to use them. Young Hawk might stand with us, and your sheriff. Wade Miller has a good heart, and he owes me his daughter's life. Sarah straightened her clothes, wishing she had her medical bag. If we can make them listen, words alone won't be enough. Running Cloud touched the spiral tattoo on his wrist. We'll need to show them. Heal someone they can't heal. Prove that both medicines together are stronger than either alone. Sarah thought of the herbs she knew grew nearby, of the ancient remedies painted on the cave walls, like morning star and evening sun, making twilight where day and night could meet. Running Cloud tucked the two-path stone away, but its warmth seemed to linger between them. They had chosen the narrow path, the dangerous way between extremes, but they would walk it together, carrying different medicines toward the same healing. Outside, a hawk's cry echoed off the cliffs. The first of their hunters had found them. In the deepening twilight, Running Cloud unwrapped a small drum from its deerskin covering. Its surface was decorated with spirals that matched his wrist tattoo, the hide worn smooth by generations of medicine people's hands. Sarah watched as he warmed it carefully near their small fire. My grandmother's drum, he explained, used to call the spirits to find guidance when the path ahead is hidden. Even though we've chosen our path, especially then. He smiled slightly. Choosing the path is one thing, walking it takes help. The drum's first soft beat seemed to wake something in the cave. The painted figures on the walls appeared to shift in the firelight, and the sound of the underground rivers changed pitch to match the rhythm. Running Cloud began to sing in Apache, his voice low and steady. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, something in her responded to their power. The drum's rhythm matched her heartbeat, or perhaps her heart had changed to match the drum. The spirits are listening, Running Cloud said between verses. They know we seek balance, not victory. Healing, not power. He handed her the drum, showing her how to hold it, how to create the right tone. When she struck it, the sound was different, lighter, higher, like morning sunlight compared to his evening shadows. But when they played together, the tones wove into something new, like the rivers, Sarah whispered, like the medicines, yes. Running Cloud's hands covered hers on the drum's surface. Listen, and Sarah heard it, not just their drumming, but other rhythms joining in. The drip of water, the crackle of fire, the pulse of earth beneath them, even the distant cry of a hunting hawk, all part of a greater song. This is how my people listen for truth, Running Cloud said, not with ears alone, but with heart and spirit. The drum helps us hear the world's deeper voice. As if in response, the flame of their small fire leaped higher, casting giant shadows on the cave walls. The painted figures seemed to dance, to tell their stories again in the flickering light. They're showing us something, Sarah said, her hands still moving on the drum. Look, on the wall before them, shadows and firelight created a new pattern across the ancient paintings. Two figures, one light, one dark, stood before a gathered crowd. As the flames moved, the figures seemed to merge and separate, like a heartbeat made visible. Our story, Running Cloud said softly, but also every story of boundaries crossed, of new paths forged. His drumming shifted, becoming more complex. The spirits say we're not alone. Others have walked this path before us. Sarah felt it then, a presence, many presences in the cave with them. Morning star and evening sun from the legend. Running, Cloud's grandmother, walks with stars. All those who had dared to cross boundaries, to seek truth in unlikely places. The drums spoke of them all, its rhythm carrying their stories, their courage, their wisdom. Sarah's medical training told her the goosebumps on her arms were just a physical reaction to sound waves and emotional stimulus. But her heart told her something else. They're with us, she whispered. All of them. Running Cloud nodded, his drumming gentling to a soft heartbeat. They've always been with us. From the moment you first learned our medicine, from the moment I chose to help you escape. We walk an ancient path, though we walk it in a new way. The fire settled and the shadows stilled, but the drum's rhythm lived on in their blood, in their breath, in the matched beating of their hearts. When Running Cloud finally wrapped the drum in its deerskin covering, Sarah felt both calmer and stronger. They had asked for guidance, and it had come, not in words or visions, but in rhythms that spoke of courage, of balance, of paths walked before. Tomorrow they would face their challenges, but tonight they had been reminded that some truths were older than the divisions between peoples, deeper than the fears that drove them apart. The sacred drum had shown them they were part of a greater song. Now they had to help others hear it too. They heard the horses before dawn. Running Cloud recognized Grey Wolf's signal call, answered by others from different directions. The hunters had found them, but this time they weren't running. Ready? Running Cloud asked, holding his grandfather's peace pipe. The pipe was old, its red stone bowl carved with symbols of unity, circles interlocking, paths crossing, hands clasped in friendship. Sarah nodded, checking the herbs she'd gathered. They'll come at first light? Grey Wolf honors the old ways. He'll wait for the sun. Running Cloud began filling the pipe with a special blend of sacred herbs. In the meantime, we prepare. The pipe ritual was ancient, older than the conflicts that divided their peoples. As Running Cloud explained each step, Sarah recognized herbs she'd used in healing, but here they served a different purpose, creating a bridge between physical and spiritual worlds. The smoke carries our words to the spirits, he said, working with careful precision, but also opens minds, calms hearts. Many treaties began with the peace pipe, and ended with broken promises. Yes, he met her eyes. But we're not offering empty words or false promises. We're offering truth they can see with their own eyes. The first rays of sun struck the cave entrance, just as Running Cloud finished his preparations. Outside, they heard voices, both Apache and English. Grey Wolf hadn't come alone. "Sheriff Miller," Sarah breathed, recognizing his distinctive tobacco-rough cough. Running Cloud touched her hand. Good. The more witnesses, the better. They stood together at the cave's mouth, unarmed, the peace pipe ready. Sarah wore her torn dress with pride now, Running Cloud's vest over it like a badge of their joining. Running Cloud had painted healing symbols on his chest and face, not war paint, but signs of his grandmother's medicine. Grey Wolf appeared first, his face like stone. Behind him came Sheriff Miller and several deputies, looking uncertain about this strange alliance. Young Hawk stood slightly apart, watching with keen eyes. "You shame your people, Running Cloud," Grey Wolf said in Apache. "I honor them by speaking." "Truth," Running Cloud replied in English so all could hear. "We have medicine to share, knowledge that could save lives." "She stole our secrets," one of the Apache warriors spat. "She learned them with respect," Running Cloud said. "As I learned paper medicine from her, both are stronger together." Sheriff Miller stepped forward, his hand near his gun, but not on it. "Miss Mitchell broke the law, helping Indians. I broke a law to follow a higher one," Sarah said clearly, "the law of healing." of using whatever knowledge can save lives. She met the sheriff's eyes. Like the medicine that saved your daughter. When Western doctors couldn't, a murmur went through both groups. Running Cloud used the moment to light the peace pipe with precise, ritual movements. The sweet smoke rose in the morning air. My grandmother had a vision, he said, his voice carrying to all, of a time when two medicines would join, when healing would flow between peoples like rivers joining beneath the earth. He held up the pipe. We stand in that sacred place now. We offer proof, not promises, truth, not dreams. Young Hawk moved then, coming to stand beside them. I have seen their truth. He touched the broken arrow at his belt. Two halves can make something, stronger than either alone. Grey Wolf's face hardened, but Sheriff Miller looked thoughtful. What proof? Let us show you, Sarah said. Bring us your sick, your injured. Let us demonstrate how both medicines working together can heal what neither can heal alone. Running Cloud offered the peace pipe first to Grey Wolf, then to Sheriff Miller. Share this smoke, watch with clear eyes, judge with open hearts. That is all we ask. For a long moment no one moved. The sun climbed higher, making the redstone pipe glow like a coal. The sweet smoke drifted between the groups, carrying with it the prayers of generations who had sought peace. Finally, slowly, Grey Wolf reached for the pipe. His fingers touched the carved symbols of unity, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, remembrance, or perhaps simply wisdom. The real test was just beginning. But as the peace pipe passed from hand to hand, enemy to enemy, a different kind of smoke signal rose above the desert. Not a warning of war, but a message of possibility. Fate didn't wait long to test them. As the peace pipe made its final round, a rider appeared on the ridge, horse lathered and heaving. "Sheriff!" The rider nearly fell from his saddle. "The Carson boy, Snakebite. They're bringing him now." Tommy. Carson was 10 years old, the same age as Sheriff Miller's daughter when Sarah had saved her. As they carried him into the cave, his small face was grey, his arm swollen purple-black around two deep puncture marks. "Diamondback," Running Cloud said, recognizing the bite pattern. "How long?" "Hour, maybe more," the boy's father choked out. "Doc's away in Mesa Valley." Sarah was already moving, medical training taking over. "He needs anti-venom." "Too late for that," Running Cloud said quietly, "but not too late for older medicine." He unfolded a beautiful blanket from his pack, its pattern showing intertwined spirals in red and white. "My grandmother's unity blanket. Every healer in our family has added to its power, weaving in prayers with each new design." They laid Tommy on the blanket as both groups watched, settlers and Apache alike holding their breath. This was the proof they'd promised, and a young boy's life hung in the balance. Sarah pulled herbs from her gathered bundles, while Running Cloud crushed different ones from his medicine pouch. "Western medicine says to make a tourniquet," she said, working quickly. "Our way says to let the poison flow out, but controlled." Running Cloud mixed their herbs together. Both are right, both are wrong. Together, they worked in seamless tandem, Sarah applying her knowledge of human anatomy and medical procedure, Running Cloud adding generations of Apache wisdom about the desert's venoms. The unity blanket seemed to glow beneath Tommy, its spiral patterns echoing the binding symbols on Running Cloud's skin. "Hold him," Sarah warned as she cut carefully around the bite marks. Running Cloud's chanting never faltered as he packed. Their combined poultice into the wounds. Tommy's father started forward, but Sheriff Miller held him back. "Let them work," he said roughly. "Both of them." Grey Wolf watched with sharp eyes as Running Cloud wrapped the boy's arm in strips torn from the unity blanket itself. "The blanket is sacred," he said. "To use it thus, all healing is sacred." Running Cloud replied, continuing his soft chant. Sarah monitored Tommy's pulse, his breathing, all her medical training focused on the subtle signs of change. "The swelling's stopping," she said after what felt like hours. "His color's better." Running Cloud nodded. "The poison flows into the blanket now. See how the pattern darkens here? The white spirals were indeed darkening where they touched Tommy's arm, as if absorbing the venom. Impossible by Western medicine's rules, but Sarah had learned to see beyond those limits. He needs both medicines now, she said. My strengthening tonics, your healing songs. Together. As they worked through the day, others began to help. Young. Hawk brought fresh water from the sacred springs. One of the deputies rode to Sarah's cabin to retrieve her medical bag. Grey Wolf himself provided rare herbs from his own medicine pouch. The sun was setting when Tommy finally opened his eyes. Hurts, he whispered. That means you're healing, Sarah smiled, checking his pulse again. Strong and steady, Tommy looked at the unity blanket wrapped around him, at Running Cloud's painted healing symbols, at Sarah's torn dress and medicine bag. Did angels save me? No, his father said, voice rough with emotion. Just people. People working together. The boy drifted back to sleep, but a different kind of healing had begun in the cave. Sarah saw it in the way settlers and Apache warriors shared coffee over the fire, in how they discussed healing techniques without rancor or prejudice. Running Cloud carefully folded what remained of the unity blanket. 3 strips had been sacrificed to save Tommy, but the blanket's pattern somehow looked more complete, as if the very act of healing had added to its power. Your grandmother would be proud, Sarah said softly. She is proud. Running Cloud touched the blanket's surface. I feel her in every stitch, along with all the healers who came before. And now there's a new pattern being woven. Grey Wolf approached them, his stern face softened by what he'd witnessed. Perhaps, he said slowly, there are some boundaries that need crossing. Sheriff Miller joined them, holding Sarah's medical journal, retrieved along with her other. Supplies. Reckon there's room in here for some new medicines, if they're offered proper and received the same. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning, bought with skill and courage, proven through healing rather than words. The unity blanket held their story now, in its torn and mended patterns, in its blended medicines and shared power. And Tommy Carson slept peacefully, watched over by 2 peoples who had found, at least for this moment, more worth in healing than in hate. Dawn painted the desert gold as Tommy Carson took his first steps outside the cave. His father supported, him on one side, Running Cloud on the other, while Sarah watched carefully for any signs of weakness. But the boy walked steady and strong, proof of what their combined medicines could achieve. Running Cloud held something up to the rising sun, a crystal as long as his finger, its surface etched by nature, into facets that caught and split the light into rainbow paths. The sunrise crystal, he explained as Sarah came closer. It shows us what can happen when light finds new ways to travel. The crystal had been his grandmother's final gift, wrapped in the unity blanket, waiting for the right moment. Now as he turned it slowly, the scattered light fell across faces both pale and copper, turning them all to gold in the dawn. Like medicine, Sarah said, understanding, finding new paths to healing. Grey Wolf stepped forward, his face solemn, but softened. We have witnessed power today, not the power of conquest or submission, but of joining. He looked at Running Cloud. Your grandmother spoke of this. I did not understand then. Understanding comes like dawn, Running Cloud replied. Gradually, then all at once. Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. Town council's meeting today. Reckon. We need to talk about changing some laws, ones that don't serve anyone's good. Sarah felt hope rise in her chest, bright as the crystal's scattered light. You mean, can't hang someone for saving lives, Miller said gruffly. Not when we've seen what these combined medicines can do. He looked at Tommy, then at his own daughter who'd arrived at dawn to witness the miracle. Reckon we need both kinds of healing here on the frontier. Young Hawk touched the broken arrow at his belt. And we need both kinds of wisdom in our tribe. The old and the new working together. The crystal in Running Cloud's hand caught a particularly bright ray, sending ribbons of color dancing across the canyon walls. Where they fell, they illuminated ancient paintings that told stories of cooperation, of barriers crossed, of new ways forged from old traditions. "The crystal shows us what is possible," Running Cloud said. "Light doesn't care what path it takes, only that it reaches where it's needed." Like healing, Tommy Carson looked up at the rainbow lights in wonder. "It's like what I saw when I was sick, colors and paths all joining together." "That was the medicine working," Sarah told him. "Both kinds, flowing together like rivers under the earth." Grey Wolf nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is what the prophecy truly meant. Not that we must abandon our ways or submit to others, but that we can learn from each other, grow stronger together." The sun climbed higher, and Running Cloud wrapped the crystal carefully in a piece of the Unity blanket. Its work was done for now, but they would need its reminder again. Change wouldn't come easily to either people. There would be resistance, setbacks, those who clung to old hatreds. But they had proof now, not just in Tommy's recovery, but in the way both groups had worked together through the night, sharing coffee and stories, learning each other's ways. Small bridges, perhaps, but bridges nonetheless. Sarah looked at her medical journal, at the empty pages waiting to be filled with new combinations of healing wisdom. "Where do we go from here?" "Forward," Running Cloud said simply. "Like light, finding its path through crystal. Like rivers joining beneath the earth, we follow where healing leads us." The two groups began to separate, heading back to their respective homes. But something had changed. Plans were already being made. For trading meetings where medicines and knowledge could be shared, for Sarah to teach basic Western medical techniques to Apache healers, for Running Cloud to show settlers which desert plants could save lives. The sun stood full above the horizon now, turning the crystal's last reflected lights into pure gold. Like a promise, Sarah thought. Like a new day breaking over a changed world. Not perfect, not completely healed, but beginning to learn how to heal itself. 1 year later, Sarah sat in her new healing room, weaving the final strands of a ceremonial band. The pattern combined. Apache designs with European healing symbols, each thread carefully chosen for its meaning. Outside, she could hear Running Cloud teaching a group of settlers about desert medicines, his voice mixing with the afternoon wind. The woven band was a wedding gift, though not a traditional one. Its creation had been taught to her by walks with stars, using techniques passed down through generations of Apache healers. But Sarah had added her own elements. Threads dyed with European herbs, patterns that spoke of both worlds. Sarah had added her own elements, threads dyed with European herbs, patterns that spoke of both worlds. "It's ready," she called softly. Running Cloud entered, followed by Young Hawk and, to her surprise, Grey Wolf himself. "The binding ceremony is tomorrow," Grey Wolf said, studying the band. "You have chosen to follow both paths?" "As we always have," Running Cloud answered, touching the spiral tattoo on his wrist. "The band shows our way forward, not his path or hers, but one we make. Together." The healing room itself told their story. Sarah's medical bag sat beside bundles of sacred herbs. Anatomy charts shared wall space with Apache healing symbols. A copy of her journal, the one that had once condemned her, now lay open on a desk. Its pages filled with carefully documented combinations of both medicines. Young Hawk picked up the woven band carefully. "The patterns, they're like the story wall in the sacred cave. They tell the same truth," Sarah said, "about hearts brave enough to cross boundaries, about healing that flows between worlds." The past year had brought changes no one could have predicted. After Tommy Carson's healing, other barriers began to fall. Sarah's classes in basic medicine drew both settlers and Apache students. Running Cloud's teachings about desert healing were sought by frontier doctors. Lives were saved by knowledge that flowed freely between peoples. There had been resistance, of course. Some settlers still muttered about witchcraft. Some Apache feared their ways would be lost. But the results spoke louder than fear. Children lived who would have died. wounds healed that would have festered, and slowly, like water wearing away stone, old hatreds began to dissolve. "Tomorrow," Grey Wolf said, "when you bind your lives together before both peoples, this band will speak of more than marriage." He touched the woven patterns with unexpected gentleness. "It will speak of a path forward for all of us." Sarah looked at the band's intricate design. Here was the lightning tree that had sheltered them, there the river they'd crossed together. The cave's twin streams flowed through the pattern, and around the edges, healing symbols from both cultures danced together like old friends. "My grandmother's vision is fulfilled," Running Cloud said quietly. "But perhaps it was just the beginning. Perhaps there are more boundaries to cross, more bridges to build." Young Hawk smiled, touching the broken arrow he still carried. "And more young ones to teach the new ways." He spoke truth. Already children of both peoples played together, learning each other's languages, sharing each other's medicines. They would grow up knowing it was possible to walk in two worlds, to be stronger for the joining. Sarah wrapped the woven band in a piece of the unity blanket that had helped save Tommy Carson. Tomorrow it would bind her life to Running Clouds, but it was already part of something larger, a symbol of hope, of healing, of barriers crossed and new paths forged. "The old stories," Running Cloud said, taking her hand, "tell of a time when all people spoke one language, when healing flowed like water between camps. Perhaps we don't need to return to those days. Perhaps we're creating something better, a way to be different together, to share wisdom while keeping our own truths." Through the window, Sarah watched settlers and Apache alike, gathering healing, herbs in her garden. The plants grew together, Western medicines beside desert remedies, each strengthening the other. Like the woven band, like their joined medicines, like love itself, creating patterns more beautiful than either could make alone. Tomorrow they would speak vows in two languages, share ceremonies from both cultures, begin a life that would itself be a kind of medicine for the wounds between peoples. But the real healing had already begun, woven through their choices, their courage, their willingness to cross boundaries others thought fixed and unchangeable. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and roses, of old wisdom and new hopes braided together, like the strands of the wedding band. And somewhere, in the depths of the sacred cave, ancient spirits smiled as one more boundary fell, one more bridge was built, one more prophecy bloomed into truth beneath the endless Arizona sky.